In a world where every post, every profile, every little thing we put online is so carefully polished, where do you even find real, genuine honesty? Well, what if I told you that the most authentic thing you've ever written wasn't some heartfelt message, but actually a string of code from a computer crash? It sounds crazy, but let's really dig into that idea. So this is the line that kicks this whole thing off. The only honest thing I have ever written was a stack trace. Now look, for most of us, a stack trace is just a bunch of computer errors, right? A jumble of text we ignore. So the question is, why would anyone claim this piece of machine gibberish is the absolute peak of honesty? It's a puzzle that really gets to the heart of what authenticity even means. And to really get that quote, we have to start with the opposite. We have to look at how we normally present ourselves online. And that brings us to our first section, the optimized self. That's that carefully constructed persona we all have. I bet this process looks pretty familiar, even if you don't really think about it this formally. You start with a raw idea, a first draft. You reread it, you tweak the tone, check your logic, but then comes that last super important step. You optimize it. You ask yourself, does this sound like me? Or maybe more accurately, does this sound like the version of me I want everyone else to see? It's a constant filtering process, every single time. And this is the end result, isn't it? Every single post becomes a kind of performance. It's been structured, it's been edited, it's been engineered to feel authentic. See, the goal isn't just to be genuine anymore, it's to be skillfully perceived as genuine. And that's a subtle but really important difference. Okay, so if that's our polished human performance, then what's the total opposite? Well, this next section, Honesty in the Machine, is all about that contrast. We're about to jump from the clean, structured signal of our writing to the raw, noisy static of a system just breaking down.
So what even is a stack trace? Think of it like a computer's unfiltered confession. It's not trying to tell a story. It has zero agenda. It's just a raw data dump. This broke, it broke right here. And this is the exact unvarnished sequence of events that caused it to fail. It's pure, unfiltered information.
And when you put them side by side like this, the difference is just staggering. A post is written for an audience. A stack trace has no audience. A post has an I, a carefully built persona. A stack trace has no author at all. That's exactly why the source material says it isn't written. It's emitted. It's like an involuntary burst of static from a system that's just been pushed too far. And this right here is what makes it so uniquely honest. It isn't trying to be truthful, Its honesty comes from a complete and total lack of choice. A stack trace is structurally incapable of style, of spin, of making things look better than they are. There's just no room for it. So this big contrast between our polished writing and the machine's raw output, it actually gives us a really powerful metaphor for what's happening in our own minds. The source material calls it the translation layer, and it's basically how we process reality itself. The idea is pretty simple. A raw, messy, complicated experiences, that's the input. All that stuff gets fed into this mental machine, and what comes out the other side is clean, structured, optimized language. This translation layer is the internal machinery we all use to turn the chaos of reality into a story that makes sense. And I just love this phrase from the source. It calls this process a lossy compression. Think about that. Lossy means that in the translation from experience to words, information is always lost. And the machine isn't trying to be perfectly accurate. That's fidelity. No, it's optimizing for emotional impact, for connection. That's resonance. And here is where it gets a little wild. The author of one of our sources actually built a tool to analyze his own writing, and he made this startling discovery. His personal compression algorithm, his translation layer, was so consistent it was like a fingerprint. For 2 whole months, he realized he had been writing the exact same post over and over and over again, just with slightly different details on the surface. And this is the real kicker. We can't just decide to turn this thing off. This is not an app you can close or a filter you can just disable. It's the fundamental operating system of how we translate our inner world for everyone else to see. It's just how we work. So it kind of seems like we're all trapped by our own internal machinery, right? But is all editing really a form of dishonesty? Well, our next section, Editing to Reveal, introduces a really crucial piece of nuance that, well, it complicates the picture in a fascinating way. This quote completely flips the script. It suggests that maybe, just maybe, true human authenticity isn't about being raw and unedited like a machine at all. Maybe it's actually found in the intention behind our edits. Are we editing to hide, or are we editing to show? And you can see that choice laid out really clearly here. On one side, you've got the edits that conceal. They smooth over any uncertainty. They optimize to persuade you. They just make everything look effortless. But on the other side, you've got edits that reveal. They actually track how your understanding changed over time, they add footnotes and context, and they bravely show the messy process of thinking itself. And this is where it all comes together. A machine is honest by default. It literally can't be anything else. But a human can be honest by design. A piece of writing can become authentic precisely because of the editing, but only when that process is used to shine a light on the journey of thought, not just to polish the final destination.
So all of this thinking brings us to a final, really challenging idea from the source material. It's something called the Unwritable Post. The source material leaves us with this powerful, almost riddle-like question. It's a challenge to think totally differently about how we communicate. What would it even look like to write the same way a machine fails?
And let's be super clear about what this means. This isn't about writing more stories about our failures. We're already pretty good at that, right? This is about producing text that has the actual structural properties of an error log itself.
So what would that even be? Well, it would mean writing with no neat and tidy argument, no satisfying story arc, no cleverly placed twist at the end. It would be a direct omission, there's that word again, a direct omission of what is true, right now, completely stripped of all the machinery that polishes it up for everyone else.
Now, obviously this unwritable post is, well, it's an impossible ideal. We can't just turn off our brains. So the real takeaway here isn't to try and become a machine. It's simply to become more aware of that internal translation layer that we all have running all the time.
And maybe that is the most authentic thing we can actually do. Not trying to close the gap between those two selves, but just having the courage to name it, to just acknowledge that vast space between the raw static we emit when we break and the polished signal we produce when we try. A really fascinating thought to end on.